ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। नारायणं नमस्कृत्यं नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जायमुदीरयेत्। नष्टप्रायेषु वभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। कृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नंदनाय च नंदगोपकुमाराय गोविंदाय नमो नमः। Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam 3:29-25. Archadav archayetavad Archadav archayetavad Ishvaram mam swakarma krit Ishvaram mam swakarma krit Yavan veda swariddhi Yavan veda swariddhi Sarvabhuteshu avasthitam Sarvabhuteshu avasthitam Archadav archayetavad Ishvaram mam swakarma krit Yavan veda swariddhi Sarvabhuteshu avasthitam Archadav archayetavad Ishvaram mam swakarma krit Yavan veda swariddhi Sarvabhuteshu avasthitam Archadav archayetavad Ishvaram mam swakarma krit Yavan veda swariddhi Sarvabhuteshu avasthitam Archadav archayetavad Ishvaram mam swakarma krit Yavan veda swariddhi Sarvabhuteshu avasthitam Archadav archayetavad Ishvaram mam swakarma krit Naveda swariddhi Sarvabhuteshu avasthitam Archadav archayetavad Ishvaram mam swakarma krit Yavan veda swariddhi Sarvabhuteshu avasthitam Archadav archayetavad Ishwaram mam swakarma krit. Yavan na veda svariddhi sarva bhuteshvavastitam. Word for word translation. Archa Adav, beginning with worship of the deity. Archayet, one should worship. Tavat, so long. Ishwaram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mam, me. Swa, his own. Karma, prescribed duties. Krit, performing. Yavat, as long as. Na, not. Veda, he realizes. Swahriddhi, in his own heart. Sarva bhuteshu, in all living entities. Avastitam, situated. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Performing his prescribed duties, one should worship the deity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead until one realizes my presence in his own heart and in the heart of other living entities as well. Purport. Worship of the deity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is prescribed herewith, even for persons who are simply discharging their prescribed duties. There are prescribed duties for the different social classes of men, the Brahmanas, the Vaishyas, the Kshatriyas, and the Shudras, and for the different ashramas, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas. One should worship the deity of the Lord until one appreciates the presence of the Lord in every living entity. In other words, one should not be satisfied simply by discharging his duties properly. He must realize his relationship and the relationship of all other living entities with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If he does not understand this, then even though he discharges his prescribed duties properly, it is to be understood that he is simply laboring without profit. The word swakarma krit in this verse is very significant. Swakarma krit is one who is engaging in discharging his prescribed duties. It is not that one who has become a devotee of the Lord or who engages in devotional service should give up his prescribed duties. No one should be lazy under the plea of devotional service. One has to execute devotional service according to his prescribed duties. Swakarma krit means that one should discharge the duties prescribed for him without neglect. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradhayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaura Dvashe Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasa Govinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Thank you all for your association this morning. I beg for your kindness and your mercy so that I may properly represent Srila Prabhupada's purports and speak according to the tradition that we have. So we are speaking in a section where Kapila Dev is speaking about pure devotional service. And really this section begins of this 29th chapter when Kapila Dev starts, I think it's in verse number 11 and 12. So if you have access to Srimad Bhagavatam, this verse says, Madguna Shruti Matrena Mai Sarva Guhashaye Manogatir Avichinna Yata Gangham Basombudav. So Kapila Dev is saying you can see the symptoms of pure devotional service when Madguna Shruti Matrena, when simply by hearing about me, my name, my qualities, there's an instant attraction. And the mind just begins to flow like the Ganga. It just flows towards the sea. The mind just flows towards Krishna. You can imagine like when someone is coming to the temple for the first time. Many of us may have had this experience, either for ourselves or for someone else. They come into the temple room, they hear kirtan, and they're like, this is wonderful. I just want to sit here, and I just want to hear. Or they're hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. They may not understand fully what's happening or what's being spoken, but there's an attraction to hearing about Krishna. So that is the sign of pure devotional service in a person's heart. Now there may be other things like desires and things that may be there. But the moment one has this attraction to hearing about Krishna, one has an attraction to the activities of Navavida Bhakti, that moment a person is eligible for pure devotional service. And so Kapila Dev says, Lakshanam Bhakti Yogasya Nirgunasya Hi Udharitam. This is the sign. Lakshana means sign. This is the sign of devotional service, Nirgunasya, above the modes of nature, that are no longer contaminated by the motivations of someone in goodness, passion, and ignorance. Because the 3 verses prior to this, Kapila Dev had spoken about the motivations of somebody who engages in Navavida Bhakti, but in Tamogun, Rajagun, and in Sattva. And now he's saying that someone who's simply attracted to me by hearing about me, and their mind just flows to me, that they're attracted to me, they want to serve me, that mentality is a sign of pure devotional service. And so Kapila Dev then goes on to describe the qualities of this devotee. In verse 13 he says, such a devotee, when his devotional service is fully developed, there's no desire in his heart for even the 4 kinds of liberation. Vina mat sevanam jana, devoid of service to me, there's nothing in the world that he wants, even up to the 4 kinds of liberation. And then Kapila Dev begins to describe, as the verses go on, the process of devotional service. So one will see in text 15, there's a specific prescription for deity worship. So deity worship is an anga of bhakti that stays from the very beginning, even after the stage of perfection. There are many examples in the scriptures of not only Mother Yashoda, but Mother Sachi and many other great personalities who even after the stage of perfection continued to perform deity worship. This is important to point out because the verse we speak of today speaks of deity worship for the progression of a devotee in the neophyte stages. So this point is important to clarify. In text number 15 it is said that Kriya Yogena Shashtena. Shashtena means with the finest materials. Kriya Yogena means one should worship the deity of the Lord with the finest of materials. Na ati him shrena nityasa. Himsa means hurt. So in the course of performing deity worship, there's some hurt that takes place. Like for example, you're picking flowers and you may notice small worms that are hard to clean out or hard to predict. Or you may notice that in cooking, there are some living entities who die. So himsa is there, but ati himsa means excessive violence. Na ati himsa. So without performing excessive violence, the deity worship of the Lord should be performed. This point is also important because in the sequence of verses that we're going to be speaking of, up to verse 25, the idea of himsa is spoken of in more detail. And himsa is spoken of as something that obstructs our progression in devotional service. So the point that needs to be clarified here is that deity worship is an essential anga of bhakti that lasts, according to Kapiladev's teachings, from the beginning up to the very end. And whatever small harm that may take place in the course of performing deity worship, that can't be helped. That is automatically taken care of by the Lord. Now, starting from verse 21, the subject matter slightly changes. So, in verse 21, the Lord says, I am present in every living entity as a supersoul. If someone neglects or disregards the supersoul everywhere and engages himself in the worship of the deity in the temple, that is simply imitation. Next verse. One who worships the deity of Godhead in the temples but does not know that the Supreme Lord as Paramatma is situated in every living entity's heart must be in ignorance and is compared to one who offers oblations not into fire but into ashes. One who offers respect but is envious of the body of others and is therefore a separatist, meaning that he sees everything as being separate from the Lord or himself as being separate from the Lord, never attains peace of mind because of his inimical behavior towards other living entities. And then text 24 says, My dear mother, even if he worships with proper rituals and paraphernalia, a person who is ignorant of my presence in all living entities never pleases me by the worship of my deities in the temple. So these 4 verses, Kapiladev is very specifically speaking of an obstacle that prevents the progression of one who is worshipping the deity of the Lord and coming closer to the Lord in pure devotional service. Before we go into analyzing why Kapiladev is speaking about this, it's actually important to get a little bit of context in terms of how the path of pure devotional service actually operates. And this is seen in the chapters 7, 9, and 10 of the Bhagavad Gita. Because if you remember, at the beginning of chapter 7, Krishna says, "O Arjuna, just hear from me how by simply hearing you can know me in full without doubt. Asamshayam samagramam yata jnasyasi tachrunu." And then in the subsequent verse he says, there are 2 kinds of knowledge that you need to know about me. He terms this jnana and vijnana. Leave aside this terminology. But he's saying there are 2 categories of knowledge you need to know about me. Knowing this, you know everything there is to know. And then he then begins this knowledge. Krishna says that you should know that the separated material energy consisting of the 8 elements or the 24 elements, they are my separated material energy. But the living entity is above this, and everything you see in this world is simply a combination of these 2 energies of mine. The point that Krishna is making is, he's teaching the devotee to see everything in this world as being his energy. So he's bringing in this idea, don't see anything as being separate from me. In everything that you look, everything that you see, you should be able to see my energy, my potency, my presence. Why is that important? And of course, Krishna elaborates on this with the verses Rasoham Apsakaunteya all the way through. He's saying that just the taste of water is me, or the fragrance of the earth is me. I am the energy of the man. I'm the intelligence of the intelligent. Like Krishna keeps on emphasizing how he can be found in every part of everything that we see. And this argument is actually concluded in 7:19, which is the central verse of the 7th chapter. Bahunam janmanam mante jnanavan mam prapadyate. So what this verse says is that after many lifetimes, bahunam janmanam ante. Jnanavan, this person in knowledge, not the jnani, but the person in knowledge of me. So it's a Bhagavad Jnani, really. Jnanavan mam prapadyate. He takes shelter of me. Now what is the cause of his taking shelter is mentioned in the next line. Vasudeva Sarvam iti, that Vasudeva or Krishna is everything. That the reason I'm feeling comfort in this cushion, it's because of Krishna. Sometimes devotees, they think, okay, we should just focus on Krishna. That means that other things that are there in our life, like a warm blanket or a warm sweater or tasty prashadam, this is Maya. Has anybody encountered this consciousness, either in oneself or in others? This is a sign of seeing something as being separate from the Lord. What is encouraged is to learn to see that whatever comforts are being provided, whatever facilities, good or bad, are being provided, are actually the potency of the Lord. We're not depending upon anyone except for Krishna. We're not dealing with anyone except for Krishna. Or through everything, we can find Krishna's presence. So Krishna specifically says that one who knows this point, that Krishna is everywhere, he is able to take shelter. Otherwise, he will keep chasing things that he is attracted to in this world. And I'm sure all of us have had this experience, that there is something that particularly attracts us. It could be, for example, someone's sporting ability, or someone's strength, or someone's level of renunciation, or someone's someone's beauty, someone's wealth, someone's intelligence. You can think about what is it in this world that actually attracts us. What Krishna is teaching us to do is take whatever attracts you, know that I am the essence behind it. I am the potency behind it. And in this way, the attraction that you have diverted to many other things in this world, focus it on me, who is the source of all of these things. Because whatever you are hoping to experience in everything else in this world, you will experience when you worship me directly. This is the faith of pure devotional service. Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Shraddha Shabde Vishwas Kohe Sudrida Nishchoy. This word Shraddha, it is a very strong faith. Krishna Bhakti Koila Sarva Karma Krita Hoy. By performing devotional service to the Lord, every other task is automatically accomplished. Or the Bhagavatam says, Yata Taror Mula Nishechanena. By watering the root of the tree, everything else is satisfied. Everyone else is satisfied. You yourself will be satisfied. There's nothing you need to do independent of devotional service. So this is one concrete pillar of knowledge that one has to have. One's intelligence needs to be convinced of this fact if one has to enter the realm of surrender, which is a prerequisite to pure devotional service. So therefore, the three phrases that are most often associated with the middle 6 chapters of the Gita are knowledge of Krishna, surrender, and devotion. So knowledge, surrender, devotion. Not knowledge in terms of the body and soul, but knowledge of Krishna. In these two categories, we've spoken of one so far. The second category of knowledge is in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna there speaks of how everything is resting in him, but everything is not resting in him. He says, I'm in everything, but I'm not in everything. And he says, Pashyame yogam aishwaram. Behold my mystic opulence, he says. Now what is the point of this? You can think but you can think about what happened with Lord Brahma. He came with his phenomenal intelligence and was trying to fit Krishna into the realm of his considerable intelligence. And he was thinking, are the coward boys here, are the coward boys there, or the coward boys are nowhere and they're somewhere else entirely. His brain was not able to process what was happening. And then suddenly before him, all of the coward boys and the calves, they turned into Vishnu forms, being worshipped by countless other living entities. And his mind was not able to take it. It literally short-circuited, because he collapsed on the ground, almost in a faint, and with great difficulty was trying to get up. Meaning that his intelligence had to admit defeat in front of the Lord. The Bhagavatam then says that he got up and was then and only then able to appreciate Vrindavan. He could see the trees were Chintamani trees, he could see the birds were chirping, and he could appreciate the transcendental nature of Vrindavan. So the idea across the 7th and 9th chapters of the Bhagavad Gita are that one's intelligence needs to be convinced that Krishna is everything, but also needs to admit defeat in Krishna's presence. And the combination of the two, the intelligence being convinced and admitting its insufficiency, are both required in order to attain pure devotional service. Now, the one verse in the Bhagavad Gita, in these middle 6 chapters, that brings together these two ideas is 10.7, just before the Chaturshloki starts. This verse says, Etam vibhutim yogam cha. Vibhutim refers to Krishna's opulences, which everything in this world are his opulences. Etam vibhutim yogam, here is in that phrase, Pashyame yogam aishwaram, behold my mystic opulence, that is referenced in the 9th chapter. Etam vibhutim yogam cha, mama yo veti tattvataha. One who understands in truth that I am everything in this world, and at the same time I have inconceivable potencies that nobody can understand. Mama yo veti tattvataha. Saha, that person, avikalpena yogena. He attains the yoga to me, pure devotional service to me, that is avikalpa, that is not diluted by anything else. Sa avikalpena yogena, and yujjate, he engages in my service, na atra samshay, without any further doubt. What this means is that knowing that I am everywhere, not just knowing it, but actually experiencing it, he says, na shamshay, he no longer has doubt. He has this complete faith that by worshipping Krishna, everything else can be accomplished. By serving Krishna, I will be completely satisfied, and I don't need anything else outside of Krishna for my own nourishment. So this devotee is then able to engage in pure devotional service. Until this realization of Krishna's presence everywhere dawns in the heart of the living entity, at least intellectually to begin with, it is not possible for that living entity to practice pure devotional service. So this context is important, because now when we come to the 3rd chapter, and Krishna is speaking about violence to other living entities, it's one thing to see parts of our life separate from Krishna. But the one thing that really places an obstacle, apart from seeing maybe we have some time in the day where we're doing something for ourselves. Maybe it's reading something, watching something, as some of us tend to do. But there's one part of our activities that puts in a major obstacle. And Kapiladev, or Acharya say, is speaking with affectionate anger, like a father is speaking to their children, because he's just spoken of pure devotional service. And he is concerned that this can become an obstacle in a person's life. So he's speaking with anger. He's telling his mother, so therefore all of us, do not make this mistake. And our acharyas explain that just as a spiritual master, like for example in one of these verses he says that your worship of me, if you do this, it's like offering oblations into dust or into ashes. Now and our acharyas give this example, it's like the guru with a faithful disciple who's serving him. The guru says that your service is just causing me pain. It's not that the service is not appreciated. It is just that there's been correction given in order to teach the disciple the proper thing. And it's a warning also that if this kind of behavior is not corrected, then their mentality will render them unsuitable or unfit to serve the Lord appropriately. That's the warning being given. And Kapiladev is speaking out of affectionate anger. In these 4 verses, there are 4 kinds of separateness of violence towards other living entities that is spoken of. And if you can follow this, in text 21, the term used is avagya, which means disregard. In text 22, the phrase used is hitva, which means to be indifferent to. In text 23, the word used is dvishata, which means to hate. And text 24, and this is a gradation of increased levels of violence from one to the other. So to disregard, to ignore. Disregard means like to treat without the proper etiquette. But worse than that is to be indifferent. Worse than that is to hate. But worse than hating is, and this is text 24, it is avamanina. Manina means to honor with some sweet words. Avamanina is the opposite. It means to sharply criticize somebody. And the Bhagavatam explains that this is the worst thing you can do to somebody. Because you can disregard someone, you can hate someone, but nothing hurts more than the sharp, cutting words of someone directed to hurt or criticize. And this is specifically, these four things are specifically, they arise through the fault of seeing someone separate from Krishna. Because the opposite is also true. When you see that verse in for those who remember Nectar of Instruction, text number 5, when the qualities of the Uttamadhikari are described, what does the verse say? Krishneti yasya giritam manasadriyeta dikshasti chet pranatibhischa bhajantamisham shushrushaya bhajana vigyamananyamanya nindadi shunya ridamipsita sangalabhya. So the qualities of the Uttamadhikari are specifically described as somebody who is an expert in worshipping Radha and Krishna through their practice of devotional service. They're directly in touch with Radha and Krishna's pastimes, and they're able to worship them. But their consciousness, nindadi shunya, they are incapable of criticizing any other living entity. They're incapable of hating, finding fault with, disregarding, not feeling compassion for another living entity. That's a specific fault they are that they don't have. So this fault of seeing this kind of feeling hate or criticizing, etc., it is because of the fault of seeing someone separate from Krishna. Now we can think about the different ways in which this actually happens. Starting from, imagine someone is just coming. They start to think that, this is like an Indian culture. So people outside of an Indian culture, they don't have proper hygiene. They don't wear proper clothes. They may not speak properly. Imagine, for example, one just, casually speaks about different cultures. In Hindi they say, so these people of this culture, they just do this. Or even amongst Vaishnavas, the way we sometimes critically speak of each other without understanding that Krishna is present in that Vaishnava's heart. Or you can take it to another extreme of eating meat, for instance, where there's specific harm performed to another living entity. So therefore Prabhupada would often say that Christians, they cannot make any progress until they decide to give up eating meat. And whenever he would talk to them, he would just say, so your Bible says, thou shalt not kill. Why are you killing? And Prabhupada would hit that point over and over and over again. They would want to talk about different other things, but Prabhupada would never talk about love of God or chanting the holy names. He would say, so why do you kill? Because harm to other living entities would prevent one from seeing Krishna in people's hearts, from the heart naturally becoming soft and moving towards the Lord, becoming attracted to the Lord's qualities. And so therefore it was an obstacle to devotional service. Even in Christianity, the two golden rules, in some sense, are considered the most important rules, are to love the Lord, thy God, with all your heart and soul. And the second rule is to love thy neighbor, meaning that to do unto them as you would have them do unto you. And this is essentially the instruction being given through these sequence of verses. And you will see that if you fast forward, so not 25, but if you go to text 27, Kapila says, Atah means therefore, Mam sarva bhuteshu bhutatmanam kritalayam arhayed. One should worship other living entities. How? Dana manabhyam. According to one's capacity, one should attempt to give to other living entities. If not possible physically, at least with one's mind, one should offer respects. Arhayed means to worship, according to the living entity's status. And then to describe how living entities should be respected, there are different grades of living entities, described from text 28 up to text 32, or text 33, 34, starting from almost inanimate living entities all the way up to a pure devotee, because each of them deserve different levels of respect. But the words used are very interesting. It says, Arhaye dhanamanabhyam. So one should worship them, at least with one's mind, or at least with the provision, with whatever one can offer. And Maitriya. Maitriya means one should treat them as a friend. And Abhinnena Chakshusha. One should not see them as being separate from Krishna, and one should not see them as being different from ourselves. So the phrase used here is Atma Ampyena. So if you go to Bhagavad Gita, Atma Ampyena Sarvatra. This is a verse in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita to describe the best kind of yogi, before the Yoginam Api Sarvesham verse is spoken. So in that verse it is mentioned that the best kind of yogi is somebody who, by reference to themselves, are able to appreciate another's pain and suffering. Are able to see, just as I am hungry, this person may also be hungry. Just as I am able to suffer with these things, they must also suffer. And one does not see that separateness between those two living entities. This is the prescription. One should stop seeing that sense of separateness. One should stop seeing them as being, them and us. And how should one stop seeing this? By appreciating the presence of the Lord in everyone's heart. And I want to describe this point a little bit more. But what I wanted to first describe in this first section of what we spoke of is what is the issue with seeing other living entities or things in general. So even though that's not directly spoken, in Vedic culture, you don't go and kick the door open. You can, but we don't do it. The feet, the moment it touches anything, even if it touches this, the edge of the wall, immediately you touch the wall and keep it to your head. What to speak of any other person or any other object? Because Krishna is present in all of these things, and the feet are not meant to be used to disregard Krishna's presence in any of these items. So there's a specific thing here, and we can think about how this applies to our own life. Because to the extent that we disregard, we hate anything, even if it's causing difficulty for us, hate anything that is around us or people in our life or people we meet, to that extent, we are unable to appreciate Krishna's presence in their heart, unable to appreciate that it is Krishna who's causing the situation to happen. And to that extent, we place an obstacle on the path of our progress in pure devotional service. Now, in text number 25, so this text 25 and 26 should be understood. Text number 25 and text number 27 should be understood to be a solution to this problem. So Krishna in this verse, he describes deity worship as being a solution to the problem. He's just said that those who worship me in the deity form with this mentality are improperly worshipping me. And the reason he says that is if you see something as being separate from me, you're thinking that this is just some worship, you're offering some flowers, some water. This is just, you're almost atheistic because you don't see that I am in everyone's heart. You don't see that I am present and doing things elsewhere. You are just, for name's sake, you are offering me something. So this kind of worship is not very helpful. But Krishna's also saying this very kind of worship, even if it is faulty to begin with proper understanding, it can become the cause of rectifying this problem. How? One has to see, if one has deities at home or one is focused on Radha Gopinath in the temple, one sees that this is my worshipable deity's home. The wealth that I have is actually theirs. This is Jagannath's home. This is Jagannath's money. This is Jagannath's family. And then you start to see that people who are coming into the home, these are Jagannath's servants. And whatever you do, it becomes Jagannath this, Jagannath that, Gopinath this, Gopinath that. And gradually a vision of seeing things connected to the Lord, it increases. It is not just that this is Krishna something. This is my worshipable deity. It's so the phrase used by Acharyas is Ishtadev. So my worshipable deity, the deity that I am personally worshipping or I'm attracted to, so the actual deity, one has Gauranga, Gaur Nitai at home, the one sees Gaur Nitai everywhere. One has Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra at home, one sees them everywhere. One has Radha Krishna deities, occasionally some of us may. And one sees that form of Radha and Krishna in everyone's heart. So it's Ishtadev, whom you see them in everybody's heart. And you see things connected to them. For those things that you're not able to connect, initially you don't engage with those items. Because the risk is, for those who are serious about pure devotional service, if there's something that one is not able to connect to Radha Gopinath, to Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, according to the deities one worships at home, strict practitioners make a specific point of avoiding engaging in that object. And as their vision of seeing things connected to Krishna grows, as their vision of appreciating how something can be used in Krishna's service grows, they begin to employ those additional things in Krishna's service. As an example, if one thinks, if I get a TV at home, then I can use it in Krishna's service. More often than not, it's used for other things, not for this. Or let me get a better mobile phone. More often than not, it's not used in Krishna's service. Or let me get a kind of pen, let me get a kind of watch, let me get a kind of clothes. One has to be very careful about what one is bringing in and make sure that one is connecting it to the deities. In household life, there's also regulation to invite Vaishnavas home and feed them. Prabhupada would say, when Grihasthas would go to him and say, what is my duty as a newly married Grihastha? Prabhupada would say, he expected a different kind of answer. Prabhupada said, you go outside the house and you call 3 times. Is anybody hungry and wants to take prasadam? You call this 3 times. Is anybody hungry and wants to take prasadam? Whoever calls and says, I'm hungry, you invite them home, you feed them, and then you send them out. So this is practical in the sense that according to one's capacity. But according to one's capacity, one should invite Vaishnavas home once a month, once a fortnight, according to one's capacity, and use one's resources to serve other Vaishnavas. If other Vaishnavas need help and shelter, they should always be welcomed into one's home. It is never an inconvenience, because they're not separate from Krishna. They're your Ishtadev's guests. They're being called here. They need to come home. They need to be taken care of in the best way possible. Whatever is practical, at least through one's mind, if one is not able to offer those facilities, one should honor them and see them as being connected to your deities. By worshipping the deities in this manner, one acquires gradually an increasingly expanded vision of Krishna being everywhere. So deity worship, therefore, for those who are materially conditioned, the word used is prakrita smrita. Kapila Dev uses that phrase. In this context, it means somebody whose behavior is unrefined. They don't know how to behave towards people in general, or what to speak of the Vaishnavas. They don't know. So their behavior is unrefined, uncouth, uncultivated. Whereas the devotee, the Madhyamadikari, their behavior is exceedingly refined, exceedingly soft, very, very soft dealings, very proper etiquette. And they're able to see Krishna in everybody's heart, in their vision. So this is the prescription to avoid this fault. And so therefore in this text, it is said, Archadav, beginning with deity worship, because that is because you can say that a neophyte worships the deities only. That is a description and it is a prescription. Do you know what I mean? It is a description of their consciousness, that this is what they do. They don't see Krishna outside in people's hearts. But it's also a prescription, because this is your level. Okay, worship the deities, but now properly worship the deities and connect everything to the deities, so that that vision expands. So it's a prescription also. Archadav archaye tavad ishwaram mam yavan naveda swaridi sarva bhuteshu avastitam. Until the time that you begin to see Krishna in everybody's heart, keep worshipping deities. This does not mean that you stop deity worship, because as we discussed in text number 16, I think it was, it says Kriya Yogena. Means that as an anga of bhakti, one should continue to worship the deities. In fact, one of our acharyas quotes a verse from the Skanda Purana which says one should rather cut off one's head or give up one's life rather than stopping the worship of one's deities. The acharya says. But one should continue to worship deities. But the point being mentioned here is that deity worship is particularly it's needed in a person's life until they're able to see their worshipable deities in everyone's heart. Ishvaram mam swakarma krit. Swakarma krit here is not an emphasis, meaning that this happens in the background. So one is in household life or is a brahmachari, and one's prescribed duties in that particular varna and ashram are just go on in the background as supportive of one's cultivation of pure devotional service. It's not the main way of worshipping the Lord. Eventually the time will come when one overcomes those attachments and one wakes up simply to chant Krishna's names, to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, to take responsibility in Srila Prabhupada's mission. So that is the stage of completely being able to give one to the 9 limbs of bhakti. But until that time, engage in your prescribed duties for the pleasure of your deities with the intention of developing this complete taste and faith in Navavida Bhakti. That's what's being mentioned here. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says that prescribed duties alone are not very helpful. One should always worship the deities. It's in fact a regulation in Vedic culture that one has to cook every day and offer something to the deities. One is not able to cook, one should at least offer something to the deities every single day. And swakarma krit, Prabhupada mentions that one should not be lazy. In Vedic culture, the idea of prescribed duties is that if one didn't have prescribed duties, and prescribed duties includes, the Vedas say, you get up in the morning, you have to brush your teeth. You get up in the morning, you need to finish your bodily activities, take a bath. All of these are prescribed duties. They're called nitya karma. And then there are duties where you have to go conduct your occupation. One of the nitya karmas is to cook and offer bhoga to the deities at home every day. That's one of the nitya karmas, by the way. And so these prescribed duties are given so as to get somebody who is unregulated. Think of our generation or my generation, where we get up and we watch the phone for an hour or hour and a half, and we get up in the morning. The first thing we do is check Facebook, check the news, check whatever, and then we get on with the rest of our day. So that generation, which is an animalistic type of life, which is based on instinct, it is to get them out of that situation. Some of us feel like, why do I have to get up? And there's so many responsibilities at home. Why do I have to do this? But this is Krishna's system. And actually most people in most families, they argue because they're feeling overwhelmed with those responsibilities. They want time out for themselves. That's actually quite stupid. Because if we step back and think about why they're there, it's Krishna who set up that system. Krishna has made it so that when you have 2 or 3 minds, there's automatically, or 4 minds, or now 5, 6, 7 minds, you have increased complexity and increased responsibilities at the home front. That is Krishna's arrangement to force people to take responsibility and use it as an opportunity to serve Krishna. Because one has to learn sacrifice and service. One has to learn to take accountability and responsibility. Those who learn to do it properly in Grihastha life, when they go to Vanaprastha life, they will become properly responsible and they will know how to use their time. Of course, for one who already can take responsibility in Srila Prabhupada's mission completely, they don't need to go through this path. But the Grihastha life is meant to teach people who are otherwise not willing to take that responsibility, not willing to work hard in Krishna's service. It forces them to work hard, to take responsibility, to sacrifice, to serve, to think of people and things other than oneself. And it's that consciousness that positions one eventually, as one develops taste with deity worship, and one begins to develop this sign of pure devotional service in Vanaprastha life, to take complete responsibility with Srila Prabhupada's mission and do what one was supposed to do in the very beginning as a brahmachari or brahmacharini, and progress in that way. So that's the context of this verse. I'll stop here. If there are any comments, thoughts, or questions, Prabhu.
Thank you very much for the class. You covered so many
Krishna.
A couple of things, if I may clarify. Firstly, is Kapila stressing the realization of Paramatma, which itself appears to be a huge task. I mean, seeing Paramatma in every living entity.
You're talking about the previous chapter?
Sorry?
You're talking about the previous chapter?
No, in this one, I think. It says that.
Okay, sir, okay, yes.
That's how I understood.
Okay.
And also, secondly,
Seeing Krishna everywhere is actually a matter of gradual realization. You're not seeing the presence of Paramatma like the transcendental form of the Lord in people's hearts, but you're able to appreciate that Krishna is present in the situation. So from the Kanishta who's only able to see Krishna in the temple to the Uttamadhikari who Nija Ishta Deva Spurti, he's able to see his worshipable Lord everywhere, to the extent that he even interprets the movement of the head of a deer, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, as being a message of the Lord to him. So it's a gradation. In fact, one's level of advancement right from Shraddha up to Prema is judged by the ability to see Krishna everywhere. So it's not a question of seeing Paramatma in anybody's heart, it's the ability to appreciate increasingly Krishna's presence in everyone's heart in life situations. That's what's being spoken of here. There's also that verse, Bhakti Pareshana Bhavo Viraktir Anyatra Chesa Trika Ek Kala. So that verse says, Bhakti Paresha Anubhava, Para Isha Anubhava. These are the three signs of devotional service. Bhakti means a taste for hearing and chanting. Para Isha Bhava means to increasingly appreciate Krishna's presence everywhere. And Viraktir, detachment from the material world. These are the three signs of increasing advancement in devotional service. And it's compared to... Sorry, go on.
so is Krishna's presence in the form of super soul? Is that what?
No, Ishtadeva for the devotee. For the devotee, it's according... So therefore, deity worship is being stressed. If one is not in the beginning stages worshipping the deities at home or focused on deities like in the temple, then it's more difficult to progress. So one should specifically become attracted to a form of the Lord, either in the temple or one is worshipping, and appreciate His presence in everyone's heart. That's the prescription. Meaning that my Jagannath or my Gaurnitai or my Radha Madhava, my Radha Madan Mohan, my Radha Gopinath, they are the ones who are causing this to happen. They're the ones who are causing this Vaishnava or this person to speak to me in this way, or this is why this interaction is happening. One should consciously bring that point into the fore when one undergoes or is going through those interactions. So it's initially a conviction of the intelligence, but because as one continuously worships the deities and one focuses on connecting every part of one's life to the deities, one will actually increasingly experience, it's not just a question of intellectualization, one will actually experience Krishna's presence in everything in one's life. And that produces faith, which leads one to pure devotional service. But it's that experience of increasingly seeing Krishna everywhere that produces that firm faith. So you hear the description of the devotee at the stage of Nishta Bhakti, which is the Trinadapi Sunichena verse. It says that more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree. Now how are those qualities possible? Because they're able to see that Krishna is everywhere. They're dependent upon Krishna, that's humility. They are also able to see that Krishna is taking care of me and He's taking care of these situations. I don't need to respond. That produces tolerance. And they don't feel the need to be recognized because Krishna is appreciating their efforts. And they offer all respects to living entities because they see Krishna everywhere. So that's the description of the Nishtha devotee. And in such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So our process is to chant Krishna's names with a sense of a relationship. But without being able to see Krishna like this, which is seen by the manifestation of these qualities, one is unable to chant Krishna's names in a manner that leads one to Prema Bhakti. So deity worship therefore is being emphasized here as the means by which one purifies one's heart and is able to see Krishna, one's Ishtadev, in everybody's heart. And then, because of course one is chanting from the beginning, but at that particular stage when one is able to see Krishna everywhere, one especially focuses on chanting. So therefore, Kirtaniya Sadahari. One increases one's rounds. So you can, whatever, the sky is the limit. But the holy names of the Lord are always present on one's tongue, regardless of what one is doing. One is specifically cultivating the chanting of Krishna's names. And the consciousness that enables one to do so is mentioned in the Trinadapi Sunichena verse, which is founded on seeing Krishna everywhere. Thank you. Nice question. You have one more question?
Prabhupada mentioned about 4 ashramas and 4 varnas. I was just thinking, for example, that Shudra has necessarily all the 4 ashramas. In general, I'm talking about, not specifically. In general, any varna, all the 4 ashramas applies for all the 4 varnas.
No, generally not. Traditionally, the Shudra will only get married. The other 3 varnas would generally take brahmacharya. The Vaishya would get married but not take vanaprastha. The Kshatriya would take vanaprastha. The Brahmana would go up to sannyas. So that was the tradition. Nowadays, honestly, if people are grihasthas and vanaprasthas, that's a very big thing. I mean, many people don't have the opportunity to become brahmacharis or brahmacharinis. Sannyas is, of course, out of reach for most people. But when people are grihasthas, according to their respective occupations, the idea behind grihastha life is to come to the stage towards retirement where one's portfolio of service is steadily increasing and one is able to, towards the end of retirement life, basically able to engage in full-time devotional service. And one is enthusiastic to get up just to hear about Krishna, just to chant Krishna's names, just to serve Srila Prabhupada. That's the consciousness at which one can take retirement. Otherwise one will just be an empty mind and not have much to do. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Especially in the work environment,
Yeah.
we know that we should not criticize anyone, but when we are working in teams, right, we have people working with us, and at times they're supposed to do something which they're not doing. There are some gaps and issues and challenges. So in those kind of scenarios, to point out those mistakes, is it right, but as per Shastras, we should not criticize?
There's a difference between criticizing, there's a difference between correcting. Like when, and the example our acharyas give, I didn't mention this in the class, is just as a father is tolerant and supportive of their son or their daughter, their child, in that manner one should deal with every other living entities. In that mood of friendliness, that's what that friendliness means. It's like you think about what your child would do. I'm not sure if you have a child, but you can visualize that situation. If they insult you, they hit you, you tolerate a lot of it. As Paramatma tolerates all of everybody's abuse. Why is this happening? What is this? Who did this? People speak in those terms. They're criticizing the Lord who has created those situations. Paramatma, Krishna, tolerates all of those things. As a father tolerates the offenses of the child. But when it is required, they'll give you one tight slap. But the consciousness is important. It's the consciousness of wanting to help, wanting to correct. And it depends on one's service. One does not need to go around correcting everybody. But if one has a service, if one is a team leader, one is a parent, one is in a position where one is taking care of people, and one has that service, then one can do it as service. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanande. Radha Gopinath Bhakta Vrinda ki. Yeah.